हेलो एवरीवन एंड वेलकम टू एडुटैप यूट्यूब चैनल। आप सभी लोगों का स्वागत है हमारे आज की इस वीडियो में, वेयर वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस सम इम्पॉर्टेंट एमसीक्यूज फ्रॉम द टॉपिक ऑफ फ्रीडम मूवमेंट एंड इंडियन यूनियन। एंड दिस टॉपिक इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट component of the syllabus for ESIC Deputy Director exam, right? So this video is the fifth such session, fifth such video for the exam of ESIC Deputy Director. And before this video, we already have 4 different videos where we have discussed 10 important MCQs in each video related to the subject of freedom movement and Indian Union for the subject of ESIC Deputy Director. If you have not really watched those videos, I would recommend that please go ahead and look at those videos, watch those videos first, and then come on to this particular video where we are going to discuss the next 10 questions. So after this video, we would have completed about 50 MCQs from the topic of freedom movement and Indian Union, and all these MCQs, they are related to the very important topics from this part of the syllabus, and it will help you a lot in the preparation for ESIC Deputy Director exam, right? So before starting this video, again I would like to remind you that if you like our content and if you really enjoy these videos, please do like this video and share this video amongst your friends and aspirants, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel and join our Telegram channel where you will be getting very important content, free PDFs for all the YouTube sessions that we are doing on our YouTube channel. And in addition to this, you will also be getting all other free content for different examinations, for different courses which are being offered by EduTap, right? So after this, a very important announcement is also there for all of you. We at EduTap are offering you a 45% discount, 40% flat discount with an additional 5% off on all the courses we are offering related to RBI or NABARD or SEBI or ESIC or EPFO or ICARAO. All these courses, they are coming up with a 45% flat discount if you use the code FEST, right? And this code is available only till 7th of October 2021. So we only have a limited period of time before we can avail this particular code. So please do not miss out on this golden opportunity. And if you are looking to prepare, if you want to prepare for any of these examinations and you are looking forward to buy any of these courses by EduTap, use this particular code in this time period and you will be getting the course in about half of its original price, right? So let us now start with the 10 MCQs. What we'll be doing is each and every MCQs, it will be there on the screen. I will read those MCQs and a brief discussion, a brief explanation I will give it to you, and then we will discuss the answer, right? So first of all, question number 1 is in front of you. This question says, which European power was first to leave from India? Right? Already we have asked this question in the previous sessions, that which European power was the last to leave from India, which of the power stayed for the longest in India, right? And now we are asking which of these European powers was the first to leave from India. We all know that English, they left in 1947. All the British territories in the Indian subcontinent, they were freed, they were let go by Britishers in 1947. Even before Britishers did so, French and Dutch and Portuguese, all these European powers, they had their territories in India. But out of these, Portuguese, they stayed the longest, right? They had Goa, Daman and Diu, Dadra Nagar Haveli, right? All these UTs, which are now, Goa is a state, and Dadra, Daman, Diu and Nagar Haveli, all of them, they are one UT. All these territories, they were under the control of Portuguese, and actually they were freed after the India attained independence. Even when Britishers left these Portuguese territories, they were under the Portuguese control. Then came French left India with their Pondicherry territory, right? So Pondicherry, Yanam, Karaikal, Mahe, all these territories which are part of the Pondicherry UT, all of them, they were under the control of French. And obviously French also left the Indian subcontinent after the British did, right? And then Dutch were the first to leave India. Right? Dutch were the first European powers to leave from India, because Dutch, they were not very successful, at getting their own strongholds. They had their strongholds in one region in Bengal, in Sirampur, and also along the eastern coast of India, but they eventually lost to the powers of European and French militaries. So obviously the correct answer for this question will become Dutch. So whenever someone asks you which of the European powers was first to arrive in India, the answer is Portuguese, right? First to arrive and last to leave, they were Portuguese, right? They came earliest and they left the last, right? Then English, if we talk about English, they came the last, right? They arrived last, the Britishers, while the first to leave, the people who left first, they were Dutch. So we have to remember these powers: Portuguese, British, Dutch. Portuguese, they were the first to come and the last to leave. The first to leave were Dutch, and the last to arrive, the first to last to arrive, they were the Britishers, right? So now let us talk about the second question. Second question is let us read the second question. Who among the following was not a party to the coalition that fought against the British in the Battle of Buxar, right? So this question is about the Battle of Buxar. We all know that Battle of Buxar happened in 1764, right? And it was a very important battle after the Battle of Plassey, where actually the Britishers, they decidedly defeated the forces of Mughal Empire, right? So who among the following was not a party to the coalition that fought against the Britishers? If we talk about the coalition who was fighting against the Britishers, first of all, Shah Alam II, Mir Qasim, Mir Jafar, Shujaudallah, all these four are options. In the Battle of Buxar, on one side there were East India Company, that were the Britishers, and on other side, on the side of the Mughal Empire, the Emperor Shah Alam II was there, right? He was accompanied by Shujaudallah, who was the Nawab of Awadh, right? And he was also joined by Mir Qasim, who was from Bengal, right? So Mughal Empire under the Emperor Shah Alam II, accompanied by the Nawab of Awadh, the Shujaudallah, and also Mir Qasim, who earlier was the Nawab of Bengal, they fought the Battle of Buxar against the Britishers. And Mir Jafar was not a part of this contingent. Mir Jafar was actually loyal to Britishers. If we all remember Battle of Plassey, in the Battle of Plassey, on one side the Britishers were there, on the other side there were the Nawabs of Bengal, but Mir Jafar, he actually betrayed his Nawab and he joined the British side, and therefore the Battle of Plassey, it went into the favor of Britishers, right? After Battle of Plassey, it happened in 1757, then 1764 the Battle of Buxar happened, and in this battle also Mir Qasim, Shujaudallah and Shah Alam, they were together, and Mir Jafar was not part of this particular contingent, right? So after this, let us now talk about the third question. Third question is about the result of Carnatic Wars. What was the result of Carnatic Wars on the political scenario in India? What was the result of Carnatic Wars on the political scenario in India? Let us look at the options. Option A says Carnatic Wars established British supremacy in India with respect to French. That Britishers, they were able to gain supremacy over French in India because of the Carnatic Wars. Option B says Carnatic Wars proved that it was difficult for the British to defeat the native rulers of India. Option C says Carnatic powers brought European powers together against their common enemies, which were the native rulers. And option D says none of the above. So if we look at all these particular options, Carnatic Wars, they happened even before they started even before the Battle of Plassey, and they were very instrumental in deciding the future of the European powers in our country, that who will be the European power, who will be the strongest in the Indian subcontinent. So if we look at the options, first of all, option C says Carnatic powers brought European powers together. European powers never came together against the Indian rulers, right? All the European powers, be it English or French or Portuguese, what they wanted was they wanted to dominate over the entire Indian subcontinent, and they wanted to dominate over other European powers. Therefore, to dominate over other European powers, they took help of the local native rulers. So all these European powers, they never came together, they never united against Indians. All these powers, they used Indians against each other, right? So option C therefore is not the correct answer. Option B says Carnatic Wars proved that it was difficult for British to defeat the native rulers of India. This is also wrong, because Britishers, they were able to defeat the Indian rulers quite easily, right? In a few battles, yes, there was some resistance offered by the Indian rulers, but on an average, if we look at the totality, the Indian native rulers, they were not strong enough to oppose either French or the Britishers, right? Next, option A says Carnatic Wars established British supremacy in India with respect to French, and this is absolutely right and should be the correct answer, because the French and the Britishers, they were, fighting with each other, and they were using various Indian rulers in their side, right? Some of them were supporting Britishers, some of them were supporting French, but gradually, as the wars progressed, the Britishers, they were able to win many of these Carnatic Wars and gain supremacy over the French powers in the Indian subcontinent. And this is a very crucial moment which decided that actually Britishers will be the colonial powers, the main colonial powers in India, and not the French, not the Portuguese, right? So correct answer for this question is option A. Next up, let us talk about question number 4. Question number 4 is about the initial days of the Britishers in India. Question says, why did Mughal king Jahangir initially refused British from opening factory at Surat? Initially, when Britishers, East India Company, they sent their emissaries to the court of Jahangir. Jahangir initially did not want to give them farmans or give them permissions to open their factories, right? What was the reason? Why was Jahangir not wanting to do so? Option A says the Mughal king was opposed to British presence in India. Jahangir did not want the British presence in India, according to option A. Option B says Mughal king was pressurized by Portuguese. That Portuguese, which were the European powers who came earlier to India, right? They were already there in India. They already had a good stronghold over the western coast of India. They pressurized the Mughal king, Mughal emperor, to not give permission to Britishers. Option C says the Mughal king wanted to avoid competition between local business and British goods. That Mughal king did not want that the foreign goods which will be brought in by East India Company, they would be in competition against the local manufactured goods, and he did not want that. Correct answer, if we talk about the Jahangir, the then Mughal emperor, he did not give permission to the English East India Company because he was pressurized by the Portuguese, right? The Portuguese governors of the western coast, especially in the present day Gujarat and Maharashtra, the entire Konkan coast was under the control of Portuguese, and they did not want to let go of this control in favor of the Britishers. That is why they pressurized initially Jahangir to not give any permission to the British East India Company, right? Let us jump on to the next question. Next question is question number 5. Let us read the question first. Which of the following European powers possessed territories in India until its independence from the British? Right? So which of these powers, they were still present in India, they had their territories in India until India got independence from Britishers, that is 1947. So who of these powers, which of these powers, they were active in India till 1947? That you have to answer. Options are Portuguese, Dutch, French, or Danes. Portuguese, Dutch, French, or Danes. People from Portugal, or Netherlands and Holland, and French people, or the people from Denmark. Which of these European powers were still there in India when English left India in 1947? If we look at the options are 1 and 3, 1 and 2, 1, 2 and 3, and 1 and 4. So option 1 is common amongst all 4 options, right? So Portuguese, obviously I told you, Portuguese territories of Goa, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, and Daman and Diu, all these territories, they were still in India. So obviously Portuguese were there till in 1947. After that, Dutch, French, and Danes. Now you have to decide. If we look at the options, we can see that either Danes were there, or either Dutch or Danes, French were there, or both Portuguese, Dutch, and French, all 3 of them were there. Correct answer, if we talk about, the correct answer is 1 and 3 only. Portuguese and French. Correct answer is 1 and 3 only, Portuguese and French, because Dutch, as I told you, they were the first to leave from India, right? They left very early. And if we talk about Danes, they already came in India, and within a few 100 years they also left. They were not able to gain very significant amount of territory in India. That is why Dutch and Danes, they were Indian endeavor, their Indian efforts, they were not very successful. But Portuguese, French, and Britishers, they were quite successful. Britishers had the largest territory. They were the most powerful European power, but they left in 1947. If we talk about Portuguese and French, they were not that powerful in India in terms of territory or in terms of military power, but still they had territory even after the Indian independence from Britishers, in form of Pondicherry, which was controlled by French, and Goa, Daman, Diu, which were controlled by the Portuguese. Next up, let us talk about the 6th question. 6th question is again related to the advent of the East India Company, the growth of East India Company. The question says, the 1765 Treaty of Allahabad gave Diwani rights in Bengal to English East India Company. 1765 Treaty of Allahabad happened after the Battle of Buxar. Right? So as I told you, in the Battle of Buxar, the Mughal emperor and his forces, they were routed, right? Therefore the East India Company, they won the war, and in the Treaty of Allahabad, they were able to gain various advantages, various concessions from the Mughal emperor. So first statement says this treaty gave Diwani rights to East India Company in the Bengal region. Second statement says the duties of collecting revenue and administration of justice were entrusted with the European officials of the East India Company. So if we talk about the Diwani rights basically mean the revenue rights. So the rights of collecting revenue, it went into the hands of Britishers. But the right to administration of justice, the right to maintain law and order, this particular administration of justice responsibility was still there with the local rulers and not with the Britishers. Therefore the correct answer of this question is option A, 1 only, that the treaty gave Diwani rights. That means the right to collect revenue to the East India Company. Therefore, the duties to collect revenue, it went into the hands of the European officials, while the administration of justice, it was still done by the native Indian religious leaders. Like for Hindus there were different rules, for Muslims there were different rules. So religious leaders who were well aware with the Indian traditional laws, they were the people responsible for administration of justice, and not the European officials, right? This was done very much later, after the Cornwallis came and he came up with his own courts, etc. After 1780s, then this administration of justice also went into the hands of the Europeans. Okay, next up, let us talk about the seventh question. Seventh question is about the theory of drain of wealth. Let us read the question. First question says, which one of the following statements appropriately defines the term drain of wealth as propounded by Dadabhai Naoroji in his work Poverty and Un-British Rule in India? This Poverty and Un-British Rule in India is a very important publication or book which has been written by Dadabhai Naoroji, and in this book he came up with this theory of drain of wealth, right? What is this drain of wealth? We all have read about this drain of wealth theory in the course that EduTap is giving you, or you must have read about it in other sources as well. This drain of wealth can better be explained by which of these following statements? Statement 1 says that a part of India's national wealth was being exported to Britain, for which India got no material returns. India's wealth was being transferred to Britain through some ways, and India was not getting anything in return. Option B says the resources of India were being utilized in the interest of Britain, that the resources like land, water, agriculture, biotic resources, coal, petroleum, etc., whatever was there in India, it was being used for the interest of Britain. This is drain of wealth. Option C says that the British industrialists were being given an opportunity to invest in India under the protection of the imperial power. And option D says that the British goods were being imported to India, making the country poorer day by day. So actually all these four statements which are given here, they are absolutely right. British goods were being imported to India, making the country poorer day by day. This is right to a certain extent, because the exports from India, the goods which were manufactured in India, they were not being allowed to be exported into other countries. Therefore, India was not able to earn foreign exchange, and we were forced to buy goods which were produced in England. So we had to purchase the imported goods, and therefore we became poorer day by day. But this is not drain of wealth. This is not drain of wealth. This is actually a kind of mercantile capitalism, right? Where the European powers, the colonial powers, they are trying to boost their own trade profits using illegitimate means. But this is not drain of wealth. Option C says the industrialists were investing in India, and they had the protection of the imperial power, the East India Company, and later the English crown. They gave protection to British industrialists, that you go invest in India, generate profits, and whatever profits you will be generating, we are guaranteeing that, and you will be allowed to keep that. Option B says the resources of India were being utilized in the Britain's interest. This is also right, but this is not exactly drain of wealth. Drain of wealth, according to Dadabhai Naoroji, means that a part of India's national wealth was being exported to Britain. That whatever revenue India was generating, whatever money India was generating, whatever GDP India was generating, a part of this GDP, a part of this money was straightforward transferred to Britain through some ways. And this is the drain of wealth. Correct answer is option A. The part of India's national wealth was being exported to Britain, and in return, India got nothing. Right? India got nothing. How was this drain of wealth happening? This drain of wealth was happening through various ways. For example, through home charges. For example, through the salaries which were being paid to the British officials who were working in India, or who were working or to serve the British interests in India, but they were being paid out of the pockets of the Indian exchequer. Right? So all these different techniques together, they coined the term drain of wealth, where the wealth of Indians, it was being transferred to the Britain. Right? Next up, let us talk about the eighth question. Eighth question is about the Rayotwari settlement. In the context of the revenue administration of the British in India, who of the following is well known for his association with the Rayotwari settlement and its implementation? If we have read about the British administrative policies, we know that permanent settlement system, Rayotwari settlement system, and Mahalwari settlement system. These were the three major settlement systems which were active in different parts of the country, which were implemented in different parts of the country, and these were implemented by the Britishers. Some British officials, they were instrumental in implementing these administration systems. So we have been given four options: Thomas Munro, R.M. Bird, Charles Napier, and Jonathan Duncan. Out of these four people, who was the person responsible for Rayotwari settlement? We often talk about permanent settlement, who was which is attributed to Cornwallis. Cornwallis, along with some other officials at that time, they were instrumental in giving the permanent settlement its original shape. And then comes Ryotwari. If we talk about Ryotwari, Sir Thomas Munro. Thomas Munro is the person who should be credited for implementing the system of Ryotwari settlement, and therefore the correct answer has to be Thomas Munro. If we talk about R.M. Bird, R.M. Bird was associated with the Mehalwari settlement and not with Ryotwari. So Mehalwari settlements, if we talk about that, R.M. Bird was significant in this. Charles Napier was the governor of the Sindh province, and he was not associated with Ryotwari settlement, nor was Jonathan Duncan. Right? So correct answer of this question is option A, Thomas Munro. Next up, friends, I hope all these questions are related to the Indian freedom struggle, the initial days of the freedom struggle, when the Britishers and other European powers, they were strengthening their hold over India. And now the ninth question is also related to the British exploitation of India's economy. Question says, which one of the following statements describes the home charges policy adopted by the British in India? What was the home charges policy? Look at the options. Option A says payment to the Secretary of State and his establishment at the India office in London through Indian Exchequer. Home charges basically meant that we had to pay the Secretary of the State and his establishment and his entire office, all the people who were working there at the India office in London through the Indian Exchequer. That whatever money was being generated in India, it was paying the salary of the Secretary of State as well as all the employees who were working in the India office. Right? Option B says house tax in urban areas and agriculture tax. Agricultural properties, houses in urban areas, they were being taxed, and this tax was known as home charges. Option C says amount of investment earmarked for infrastructure development in India. The sum amount of money was given by the Britishers for infrastructure development in India, and this money was known as home charges. And option D says charges on the transfer of finished products from England to India. That whatever money was charged on the export or import of finished products from England to India, that was home charges. But if we talk about the correct answer has to be option A, because home charges basically meant all the payments which were made to the Secretary of State. We know that Secretary of State, he was answerable directly to the Prime Minister of the Britain, and he was obviously answerable to the Queen of the England, right, the sovereign crown of England. Therefore, this Secretary of State, he was a high-ranking official. His salary, including the salary of his entire staff, his entire office, as well as all the employees who were working in India office in London, all of these people, they were paid through amount or the money which was being generated by the Indian Exchequer, right? So correct answer for this question becomes option A. Now, friends, the last question of the day is related to the permanent settlement system. Under the permanent settlement system, the zamindars were required to issue pattas or title deeds to the farmers. So zamindars, they had a large amount of land under their control, and all the farmers who were working on that land, they had to be given these title deeds. They had to be given these documentations of their land, right? Originally known as pattas, pattas, right? So these are known as pattas or land titles or title deeds. These zamindars, they had to give these title deeds to the farmers who were working on their lands. But these zamindars, they did not issue these pattas. They did not issue these rights. What was the reason for that? Options, look at the options. Zamindars were trusted by the farmers. That farmers, they had their full faith in the zamindars, and they knew that zamindars would take care of them. They would not usurp their land. They would not take control of their land, and therefore there was no need to issue pattas to the farmers. This is option A. Option B says zamindars deliberately avoided issuing pattas to the farmers. That zamindars did not want to issue pattas to the farmers so that they can control the entire land without giving any right to their farmers. Option C says it was the responsibility of the British government to issue pattas. That it was not the responsibility of zamindars, but the responsibility of the British officers, that they have to give pattas to the farmers. And option D says none of the above. But the correct answer of this question is option B. Zamindars, they deliberately avoided issuing pattas to the farmers. They did not want to give land rights to the farmers. They wanted the entire land to themselves, because Britishers, what they did was, Britishers earmarked large amounts of land, and they appointed one zamindar that you have to take care of this land, and entire revenue that has to be generated from this land, we will collect this revenue from you. Now the zamindar had to give land rights to all the different farmers who were working on that land, but zamindar did not do so. He only exploited the farmers who were working there. He exploited revenue from them and then supplied revenue to the Britishers, and gradually that zamindar became the owner of the entire land, right? So this is the correct answer for this question, option B. Zamindars deliberately avoided issuing pattas to farmers. Right, friends? So this is all for today's session, my friends, and I hope you all have learned a bit about the Indian freedom struggle, especially the initial days of the Indian freedom struggle, when Britishers and Portuguese and French, they were trying to strengthen their hold over India. And just like this, we will be conducting more such sessions in the future. Also, we will be discussing 10 important MCQs for the ESIC examinations in the coming sessions as well. So please keep on learning, keep on growing. If you really like this session and the content that we are providing in this session, please do like this video and also share this video amongst other friends and aspirants, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Right? So keep on learning, keep on growing. Jai Hind and Jai Bharat.